At dinner, while everyone passed around the mashed potatoes and exchanged small talk, my husband looked me straight in the eye and said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, "From now on, you sleep in the garage." I didn't ask why. I didn't flinch. I simply nodded and picked up my fork again. My son kept eating like nothing happened. My daughter-in-law smirked. No one said a word. I've learned silence is the most painful applause cruelty can receive. That night, I quietly gathered my things. I took a pillow, a blanket, and walked into the garage. It was cold, dusty. A stack of Christmas decorations was still in the corner. Boxes labeled with the names of holidays I used to host. Back when I was the one setting the table. Back when my name still meant something in this house. I didn't cry. Instead, I started writing. A list. Not of things to pack, but of moments. Moments like this one. Moments I had ignored. Moments I had excused, because that's just how families are. But now? Now it was different. The first moment I wrote down. 2 months ago, they replaced my recliner with a dog bed. I came home from a doctor's appointment and found it gone. My daughter-in-law said they were redecorating. No one asked me. No one ever did. The second. My name missing from my granddaughter's wedding invitation. It said, hosted by Mr. and Mrs. James Whitaker. That's my son and his wife. But they live in my house. Use my money. And somehow, I had become a footnote in my own legacy. The third. They canceled my pharmacy auto refill. Said I was taking too many pills. Suddenly, I had to ask permission to manage my own health. Each memory I wrote down came with a sting. But instead of anger, I felt something colder. Clarity. I wasn't their mother. Not anymore. I was the help. The babysitter. The funding account. The silent woman who knew better than to speak during dinner. And so, in the dim light of that garage, I began to plan. Not revenge. Not rage. But freedom. I folded the blanket beneath me. I pulled my coat tight. And I smiled. Because they had no idea what I kept in the safe upstairs. They had forgotten who this house used to belong to. They thought silence meant surrender. But I was just waiting. The next morning, I woke up in the garage with a stiff back and the taste of dust in my throat. I used to wake up next to a man who brought me coffee in bed. Now, I woke up next to lawn equipment. I could hear them laughing inside, my son, his wife, even the grandkids, probably pancakes, maybe bacon. I used to be the one who cooked those Sunday breakfasts. Now, they didn't even knock on the door to see if I was still breathing. I didn't join them at the table. I waited. Waited for the garage door to stop rattling from the wind. Waited until their laughter faded into morning TV noise. Then I made my way inside to use the bathroom. No one looked up. No one cared. When I stood at the sink and saw myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. My silver hair, always neatly pinned, was a mess. My eyes looked older than 72. I rinsed my face. No tears. Just water. By noon, I was back in the garage. I took out the folder they didn't know I had. Inside were copies of property records, tax receipts, bank statements, all still under my name. They hadn't bothered to check. Or maybe they assumed I'd signed it all away when I moved in. But I hadn't. It was still mine. The house, the land, the accounts. And I had let them pretend it wasn't, because that's what mothers do. Right? We give, we overlook, we forgive. But they had mistaken my silence for weakness. That evening, my granddaughter came to the garage. She was 8, sweet girl, always polite, even when the rest of them weren't. "Grandma, why do you sleep out here?" she asked, hugging her stuffed rabbit. I smiled and said, "Because sometimes, grown-ups forget how to be kind." She tilted her head. "Did Daddy forget too?" I didn't answer. Some truths don't need to be explained to children. They already feel them. She gave me a piece of candy from her pocket and whispered, "You can sleep in my room if you want." I almost cried. But I didn't. Instead, I kissed her forehead and said, "Thank you, honey. You just reminded me why I need to be strong." That night, I opened my notebook again. Added a few more lines to my list. The time they made me sit in the car during the birthday party at the restaurant. When they introduced me as James's mother. She just lives with us. Like I was some tenant. The way they locked the liquor cabinet when I hadn't touched a drink in 20 years. Not dramatic moments, just little cuts, one after another, until there's barely anything left. But I was starting to feel something return. Not bitterness. Power. The kind that comes from remembering who you are. And knowing you've got nothing left to lose. The third night, I didn't sleep much. It wasn't the cold, I had gotten used to that. It was the noise in my mind, the sound of every moment I'd let slide. I kept playing them back. Every sigh, every snide remark, every time they forgot to include me in a family photo or left me out of a group text. There was a pattern, and I'd been blind to it. They'd been erasing me piece by piece. That morning, I decided to go for a walk. The fall air bit through my sweater. But I needed to move. To feel my feet on the ground again. I passed the rose bush Noel and I planted our first spring in this house. It was overgrown now, untended, like me. I paused for a moment and touched one of the wilted petals. Still here, I whispered. Inside, I heard the garage door open. My daughter-in-law peeked in. "Oh, you're not here?" she said to no one in particular. Then closed it again. "No, good morning." "No, do you need anything?" "Just a door." Closing. Again. Back inside, I found a letter had arrived for me. Postmarked from the county assessor's office. She must have opened it by mistake. Inside was a reminder of the property tax due. In my name. I smiled. I tucked it into my folder. Later that afternoon, while they were out shopping, I walked into the main house and took a quiet inventory. My jewelry box in the bedroom, emptied. Just cheap trinkets left. My bookshelf in the den, rearrange. Most of my books were gone. Even the picture of my wedding day, moved into the hallway. Behind a coat rack. I wasn't imagining things. They weren't just treating me poorly. They were phasing me out. Preparing for something. I checked the safe in the upstairs closet. Still locked. Still mine. Inside were the originals, my deed. My late husband's will. A power of attorney document they didn't know I had revoked a year ago. I traced my finger over the edge of the envelope. Then carefully, I added the letter from the tax office. Just in case. That night, I stayed quiet again at dinner. They didn't say much either. My son seemed distant. My daughter-in-law kept checking her phone. At one point, she laughed at something and said, "Oh, that lawyer is so dramatic." She caught my eye and smirked. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. I'd seen that smirk before, on the day she told me they'd be helping manage my medications. I finished my meal in silence. After dinner, I returned to the garage. I opened my notebook and began to sketch a timeline. I wasn't just collecting moments now. I was preparing. Because people like them think silence means surrender. They never expect the quiet ones to strike back. And when they do, no one hears it coming. The next week passed slowly. They didn't send me back to the garage. But they didn't invite me back to the house either. I floated somewhere in between, visible, but not seen, spoken to, but not spoken with. The days felt quiet, but not the peaceful kind. More like a silence that knew what was coming. I spent most mornings tidying the yard, pulling weeds, sweeping the walkway, small things that made me feel like I still belonged to something. Sometimes, neighbors would wave, I'd wave back. None of them knew I slept next to a stack of storage bins. None of them saw the notebook tucked behind a paint can. On Thursday, I overheard something. I was out back, pruning the rosemary bush, when the kitchen window cracked open. "She still hasn't said anything," my son said. "Of course she hasn't," his wife replied. "She's old. She doesn't understand how this works." There was a pause. Then laughter. I snipped another branch. That night, I made tea in the garage with the old electric kettle I kept from my apartment. It still worked, just like I did. I sat down and looked through the folder again. There was one last paper I hadn't touched. The letter from Noel, the one he wrote a month before he died. I hadn't read it in a long time. But I needed to. His handwriting was still careful. Still neat. "My love." If they ever make you feel like less than who you are, I want you to remember this. You built this family. You held it together. And you don't owe them silence. Not if they use it to erase you. I folded the letter back slowly. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I finally knew what I had to do. Not yell, not confront. That was their language. Mine would be quieter, but louder in the end. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not a big office, just a kind man Noel used to play chess with. We met at the library cafe. I brought the folder. He looked through it, page by page, and said only one thing. You're still the legal owner of everything, and you have more power than they realize. I nodded. Then I asked him to help me write 3 letters. One for the county, one for the family trust manager, and one for my son. They wouldn't be sent yet, but they were ready. That afternoon, I walked back into the house. My daughter-in-law looked surprised. My son looked nervous. I just came to get a few things, I said. They didn't stop me. I walked upstairs, past the photos on the wall. Most of them didn't include me anymore. That was fine. Because when the truth came out, they'd wish they had pictures to remember me by. The next few days, I went about my routine as usual. I watered the plants, refilled the bird feeder, took a walk every afternoon at the same time I used to walk with Noel. Nothing about me looked different on the outside. But inside, the silence was no longer heavy. It was focused. They didn't suspect a thing. Until Saturday. It started with a knock at the door. Not the front door, the garage. It was my granddaughter again, clutching her sketchbook. "Grandma, can I draw out here with you?" she asked. I smiled and cleared a space next to me. Of course. She sat cross-legged on the floor, humming as she colored. After a while, she looked up and said, "Daddy says we might move soon. Is that true?" I paused. "What makes you say that, sweetheart?" "I heard Mommy say this house will be theirs soon. That you won't be here much longer." I gently tucked her hair behind her ear. "Some things change, baby, but some things stay exactly where they belong." That evening, my son came into the garage. First time in weeks. "Hey," he said, awkwardly, "we've been meaning to talk." I nodded. "I'm listening." He shifted his weight. "Look, Romy and I have been thinking. Maybe it's time you considered moving into a senior living community. They've got activities, people your age, you know?" I stayed quiet. He continued, "It'd be better for everyone. And honestly, we could really use the space." There it was. The honesty, finally. Not kindness, not concern. Just convenience. I folded my hands. "And who owns this house?" I asked. He blinked. "Well, technically, you do, but..." "No, but," I said calmly, "I just wanted to hear you say it." He opened his mouth to speak again, but I stood up and walked past him. Out into the driveway. The autumn wind had picked up. Dry leaves spun around our feet. "Dinner's almost ready," he called. I didn't reply. Because I had already eaten. I went to the library the next morning and printed 3 copies of the letters my lawyer had drafted. Each envelope was thick, each one sealed tight. I mailed the first 2. The third, addressed to my son, I kept. It would be hand-delivered. Not today. Not in anger. Not as revenge. But when the time was right. When the erasure had gone far enough. Until then, I'd continue my part. I'd sweep the walkway. Smile at the neighbors. Drink my tea in the garage. Let them think I'd accepted my place. Because the thing about erasing someone is, if you don't do it properly, they come back with ink thicker than yours. The next week, my granddaughter stopped coming to the garage. I asked no questions. I didn't need to. That's how it starts. They remove the soft things first. The things that still tether you to love. Then, when you're hollow enough, they finish the job. I could hear laughter from inside the house every evening, wine glasses clinking. The occasional loud story. They didn't speak to me much anymore. Just short nods, quick glances. I wasn't part of the story. Just a shadow in the margins. Until one morning, I stepped into the kitchen for tea, and found my mug missing. The same floral mug Noel had given me on our 40th anniversary. In its place was a note. Use disposables. It's easier to clean. The kindest theft is the one you try to justify. I didn't argue. I just picked up a paper cup and poured my tea. When people try to erase you gently, it's not mercy. It's strategy. But I was done being gentle. That afternoon, I opened my safe. I took out the third letter, the one with my son's name. I walked to the main house and placed it on the dining table. The same table I once hosted Thanksgiving at. The same table where you learned to cut turkey. Where we lit birthday candles. Where I read him books before bed. Then I returned to the garage and waited. It didn't take long. 30 minutes later, I heard footsteps, rushed. Heavy. The garage door swung open. "What the hell is this?" my son asked, waving the letter. I looked up from my notebook. "It's notice. You'll be vacating the property in 30 days. He laughed, like I had made a joke. "Are you serious?" "As serious as that letter." He stared at me, like he was seeing a stranger. "We're family." I nodded. "We were." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Rage, confusion, maybe shame, I couldn't tell which emotion won. "You can't do this." "I already have." He stormed out. That evening, they didn't eat dinner in the dining room. They ordered takeout, ate in silence. My granddaughter didn't come say goodnight. But I knew she would understand someday. Later that night, I added the last item to my list. The time they learned I wasn't weak after all. The house grew quieter after that. Not in sound, but in spirit. I could feel it in the way doors opened slower. Voices lowered when I passed by. They moved around me like I was a ghost in a place they no longer controlled. They tried to talk, once. My daughter-in-law came to the garage with a tray of cookies. "Sugar, like the kind I used to bake." "I thought we could talk," she said, placing the tray on a folding chair. I looked at the cookies. Store-bought, still cold. "I don't have much of a sweet tooth these days," I replied. She stood there, expecting more, a softening, maybe, a crack in the surface. But I just returned to trimming my notebook's pages. I liked things neat. After a few minutes, she left. Took the cookies with her. They didn't try again. Instead, they began to pack. Little things at first. Framed photos. Boxes of seasonal decor. The kitchen grew barer. I saw my wedding china quietly disappear from the cabinet. And then, one day, a "for sale" sign appeared in the front yard. Next to a new address scrawled in black marker. "Moving soon, call for info." It wasn't their house to sell. But desperation makes people bold. I waited. 3 days later, the realtor came. She was polite, young, wore heels too high for walking on gravel. "I'm here to do a walkthrough," she said, clipboard in hand. I invited her inside. She walked room to room, jotting notes, admiring details I had chosen decades ago. "These archways are original, right?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "and so is the owner." She blinked. I handed her a printed copy of the deed. My name, notarized, clear. I saw her expression change. Then I added, "You'll want to contact me directly from now on." She nodded slowly. "Of course." I had no idea. "Most people don't," I replied. By sunset, the sign was gone. The house was mine again. Legally, publicly, visibly. But ownership wasn't the point. It never was. It was about memory. Respect. Place. Later that evening, I stood in the living room for the first time in months. No longer as a visitor. The light hit the floorboards the same way it used to. I could almost see Noel sitting in his chair, reading the paper, asking me what was for dinner. I whispered into the silence, "We're back." They moved out quietly. No goodbyes, no final insults. Just boxes, one after another, disappearing into the back of a rented van. I didn't watch them leave. I stood in the backyard instead, clipping dead branches from the rosebush Noel and I once planted. When the sound of the engine faded, I turned back toward the house. My house. There was no sense of triumph. Only stillness. The kind you feel after a storm passes, not because the sky is blue again, but because you survived the wind. I walked through every room that afternoon. Slowly. I opened closets, pulled sheets from drawers, aired out what had been stifled. In the kitchen, I found my floral mug. Tucked behind the blender, dusty, but intact. I washed it by hand. Set it back on the shelf. Right where it belonged. In the garage, I gathered my few things. The notebook, the old kettle, the thin blanket, each item felt lighter now. I closed the garage door one last time and left it unlocked. I didn't need to hide anymore. That evening, I made dinner for one. Roasted vegetables, a small cut of salmon. The same meal Noelle used to request on rainy nights. I ate slowly, no rush, no voices talking over me. No one sighing at how I chewed too loudly. No one correcting how I folded the napkins. Just quiet. But not the same quiet I once feared. This silence was mine. After the dishes were done, I sat on the porch and watched the light fade. Neighbors passed by, some waved, some didn't. I didn't mind either way. Because I had found something better than validation. I had found space. Space to remember who I was. And to stop apologizing for it. Later that night, I opened my notebook for the final time. I didn't write a memory. I wrote a note to myself. You stayed. You watched. You learned. And when it mattered, you acted. Then I closed the cover. Put the notebook on the highest shelf. And let the story end. A week after they left, I received a letter. Handwritten, no return address. But I recognized the shaky loops in the handwriting immediately. It was from my granddaughter. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Lined, folded twice. Grandma. I miss you. I don't understand why we had to go. Daddy says it's just for now. Mommy doesn't talk about it. But I remember how you used to braid my hair and make toast with honey. I keep the stuffed bunny you gave me on my bed. I hope you're okay. Love. Lily. I read it 3 times before folding it again. Then I placed it between the pages of my notebook. Not in the list of wrongs. But in a page I left blank on purpose. A page for hope. Because even when the branches have been cut back, the root remembers. And maybe, someday, when she's older, she'll knock on my door, not because she needs something, but because she remembers kindness. The next morning, I baked honey toast. Just in case. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in my floral mug and watched the steam curl toward the ceiling like smoke signals only I could read. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt honest. Not perfect, not healed, but real. Some afternoons, I'd walk down to the library, sit by the window and watch people come and go. A few times, I saw other women like me, older, quieter, carrying more than just tote bags. I wondered how many of them had sat in garages, too. How many had swallowed words like pills, small, bitter, and daily. Sometimes I wanted to ask. Instead, I started writing again. Not a list, not a complaint, but a letter. To the woman who's been told she's in the way. You're not. To the mother who gave everything and was handed silence. You still matter. To the one sleeping in the cold while others feast. Your warmth is not gone. It's just waiting for you to take it back. I didn't know if I'd ever send it. But writing it made me feel less alone. That evening, I placed the letter in the same drawer as the deed in Noelle's last note. And for the first time in a long while, I lit a candle for myself. Not for the past. Not for grief. But for presence. Because surviving is one thing. But living again. That's the quietest rebellion of all. Some mornings, I still wake up before sunrise. Old habits, I suppose. I boil water, toast a slice of bread. Sit on the porch with my blanket across my lap. The world is still soft before the day begins. And in that quiet, I don't feel forgotten. I feel full. The silence no longer stings, it heals. Every so often, I get updates through the grapevine. My son took a new job in another town. My daughter-in-law posts pictures on social media. Big smiles, new curtains, matching outfits. But none of the photos include Lily. That tells me everything I need to know. She's still growing. Still watching. And maybe, still remembering. I don't wish them harm. I'm past that. But I do hope that, one day, They'll understand the weight of the chair they pushed me out of, the warmth of the seat they offered the dog instead, and the power of the door they thought they had closed for good. I've started volunteering at the community center down the road, just a few hours a week. Folding clothes, serving soup. Mostly, I listen. One woman, Evelyn, is 84. She moved in with her grandson 3 years ago. Now he keeps her debit card in his wallet, for convenience. She laughs when she tells the story, but the edges of her smile tremble. Another, Joyce, brings photo albums every Tuesday. She doesn't show them to anyone. She just opens them like proof. As if she's afraid that without pictures, she might disappear. I see myself in all of them. And maybe they see a little of themselves in me. So I started something small, a writing circle. No rules, no judgment, just a notebook, a pen, and a story only they can tell. The first week, only 2 showed up. Now, we've got 10 regulars. Women who have been erased so slowly, they almost didn't notice. Now they write things like, I raised 3 boys and never once heard, thank you. But I still cook for them on Sundays. I used to be a teacher. Now they say I repeat myself too much. They call me forgetful, but I remember everything they've done. We don't talk about revenge. We talk about reclaiming. Because power doesn't always look like shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes, it looks like holding a pen steady in a wrinkled hand and writing your name again, just to remind yourself it still belongs to you. And when I look around that room, filled with voices too long silenced, I realize the garage wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a different chapter. One I got to write. I found one of Noelle's sweaters last week, stuffed in the back of the hallway closet, under a pile of unused wrapping paper and tangled Christmas lights. It still smelled faintly of cedar and laundry soap. Still had that one sleeve slightly longer from when he used to tug it nervously while thinking. I didn't cry when I held it. I smiled. Because I remembered. That's the thing about being alone but not lonely. Memories visit differently. They don't haunt, they sit beside you like quiet friends. I wore the sweater that night, sat on the porch, watched the wind sway the trees. And I imagined him sitting next to me again. Not as a ghost, but as the man who once whispered, "You hold this house together better than nails ever could." The next morning, I made banana bread. Just 1 loaf. Enough for me and a few slices to bring to the writing circle. Evelyn shared her story this time. About the baby she lost in 1964. She had never told anyone, not even her husband. I thought if I said it out loud, it would make it too real, she said, hands trembling over her teacup. We didn't say much. Just sat with her in the truth. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a woman can do at 84 is admit she still carries grief in her bones. And sometimes, the strongest thing another woman can do is sit quietly and not look away. Later that afternoon, I visited the rose bush again. It had started blooming. Not full, not bold, but a soft promise. I took one of the blossoms and placed it in a vase on the dining table. Right in the center. That table has seen so much: meals, arguments, silence, betrayal. But now, it saw peace. And maybe that's enough. That evening, Lily's second letter arrived. This time, her handwriting was steadier, more deliberate. Dear Grandma, we moved again. I don't like this place. I miss your tea and your porch and your soft blankets. Mommy says we won't visit for a while. But I drew you something. It's a picture of us on the swing. I made sure to draw your flowers too. Love. Lily. She had taped the drawing to the back of the letter. Crayon lines, stick figures, a rose bush with pink dots. I pinned it to the fridge, right next to a shopping list and the library schedule. Because some things belong front and center. Not hidden, not erased. Seen. Just like me. It's been 3 months since they left. The rooms are quieter, yes. But not empty. There's space now for music in the mornings. For lavender oil on pillowcases. For reading entire chapters out loud, just to hear the sound of my own voice again. The shadows that used to cling to the corners of this house have softened. The hurt has loosened its grip. I no longer replay the night he pointed toward the garage. That moment used to feel like the final scene. Now, I see it for what it was. A turning point. The moment I stopped begging for space in a house I already owned. The day I stepped out, not into exile, but into clarity. Sometimes, the most powerful shift isn't loud. It's a whisper to yourself that says, "No more." Today, I planted a new rose bush. Next to the old one. This time, red. The color of endurance. The color of quiet rage that builds into something beautiful. I wrote a letter to Lily this morning. It wasn't long. My sweet girl. I miss you too. I hope you always keep drawing. One day, when you're ready, I'll tell you everything, not to make you choose sides, but so you'll understand that being kind doesn't mean being silent. Love always. Grandma. I didn't mail it. Not yet. Some seeds need more time in the soil. This afternoon, I sat at the dining table with a cup of tea, my mug. The floral one, the one that stayed with me through it all. Steam curled into the air. I looked around at the room that once held echoes of raised voices. Now it held the soft hum of a radio. The creak of wood warming in sunlight. And the slow, steady breath of a woman who reclaimed her name without ever raising her voice. I lit a single candle. Not for mourning. Not for memory. But for marking a chapter closed. And as the flame danced, I whispered something. Not to the walls. Not to Noel. Not to them. But to myself. I stayed. I remembered. I wrote it all down. And I'm still here.